a long time kind of episode. You let me know when you see us on the tubes, and we'll really go at it.
Like...
I'll just rock out the music in the meantime.
1 second. Yeah, we're in.
All right. What's up, YouTube? What's up, Facebook, Instagram? We got Twitch. We got TikTok. Always glad to have you guys around. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Lots of people have been asking me kind of the same question in different ways for years. How did I get into voice acting? How did I overcome the challenges of being a blind guy? And it kind of just boils down to setting a goal and following through. And rejection is a huge part of getting on the road to achieving your goals. And I think when I started this channel, Brooks, I'd already kind of burst down a bunch of those hurdles. I'd become a pretty well-known voice actor. I had a pretty huge resume. I'd done a lot of things. And I think, when people joined this channel, especially it started in 2020, got popular around 2022. I'd already, been through a lot of stuff. And so people were kind of seeing the finished product, if you want to call it that. So I wanted to talk about, start by talking about 3 rather massive hurdles / rejections that I suffered right off the bat as I was trying to get into the voice acting business. I knew early on that I wanted to be a voice actor. My voice changed when I was, 12 or 13. And one day, hi, my name is Pete. And I sounded like that. And I woke up in the morning and I was like, hey, Mom, what's for breakfast? Mm-hmm. And like immediately everybody's like, you should get into voice acting. So I got to Boston University in 1995 and immediately took an internship with a radio station, WRKO. And I thought like right away, I wanted to be on air. I wasn't sure how. I was thinking maybe I'd be a DJ. But after a while, I was like, voice acting, being the voice of a station sounds really cool. So the first of 3 big rejections I suffered was 1997. I'm going to do 1997, 1999, and then I'm going to fast forward to 2013. And all 3 of them were pretty crushing to the point that if I hadn't burst through those hurdles, I never would have gotten into voice acting. I would have taken a completely different path. But I remember it so specifically because it was August 31st, 1997. I just turned 20 years old a couple months earlier, and it was my mother's birthday. And history buffs might know that August 31st, 1997 was the day that Princess Di died.
Oh. And I didn't know that.
No, it's, people they're following the royals or stuff, or that were a little older, because how old were you back then? Like 7?
1997?
7, yeah.
I would have been, 8 years old.
Okay, so yeah, you're forgiven for not knowing.
Yeah.
So, I was in I guess it was my sophomore or junior year, it was in between my sophomore and junior year of college. And I'm at the radio station. I was planning on going home to see my mom for her birthday, and we get the news that Princess Di has passed away. And we are supposed to get promos together, immediately. It's very important. In between the talking, it says, the passing of Princess Di, the latest information right here on AM 680 WRKO. And then there were cuts from the news and stuff, putting promos together. It's what the news does.
Right.
And I was just an intern, but I was supposed to be getting these together. And I called the voice guy, Dana Hersey, called him, and I didn't get him. And I start thinking, I'm 20 years old and I'm thinking like a break, like this is my big break. That was my thought process at the time. And I'm thinking, I'm going to voice these promos. Like I've always wanted to be on the air. No one let me be on the air. I had joined the union. Back then you had to be in AFTRA, a union, in order to be on air. So I joined the union. I was ready to go. The promos are written and I read them, and they ran all weekend. They ran Saturday. They ran Sunday. The voice guy was out of town. The program director was out of town, and the assistant program director was around, but not very reachable. Everybody comes in on Monday, and the APD finds me and goes, what did you do?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, I got 3 promos together. I had them running every hour. We were totally on top of the coverage. I skipped my mother's birthday party.
Wow.
And I was updating the promos. I was saying, Princess Di passed away, and then like latest news out of the BBC. And so I'm thinking I did a great job, right?
Right.
And he goes, you embarrassed the station.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, why? He's like, your voice does not belong on air. He's like, it was painful. It was horrible. You made a laughingstock out of us.
Oh my.
He said laughingstock. I remember that very
crazy.
specifically. There was only a couple news stations in Boston. There was WBZ and there was WRKO, the big news stations, and they had like really serious, somber news. And at the time, it's 1997. I don't know how to use my voice. I just had been told, everybody told me that I had a big, deep voice. So the promos, as I read it a minute ago, the passing of Princess Di, stay tuned to the latest. Like it should be something like that.
Right.
But I was like, Princess Di passes away. The latest information and your calls right here on AM 680 WRKO. You know, basically how when everybody calls our show and they're like, I've got a voice for radio. And I'm like, yeah, exactly.
It's always epic voice.
Right. Yeah. And I was just, because I was in love, you know, I had the headphones on and I was like, I sound amazing.
Yeah.
And so the APD comes in and tells me that I made the station a laughingstock.
What's an APD?
Assistant Program Director.
Okay, gotcha.
And the big boss guy, the PD, I almost said his name. It's not important at this time, but he comes in furious.
Oh, no.
Furious. Because it was like the biggest news story of the decade at that point. Well, I guess OJ was slightly bigger, but it was a big news story. And he gets in my face. I'm a 20-year-old kid. I remember almost like thinking I was going to pee my pants. I got so scared. And he got in my face and he told me, you are never going to be on air, ever. And the fact that you did this shows me you're not ready. And he told me, he nitpicked my voice. He told me, he said, you sound like a puker, which was obvious. He said, you have a bad accent. You're nasal. You talk too fast. I can barely understand you. And you think you're going to be a voiceover guy? He said, get that S out of your head right now and get back in there and dub some commercials.
Wow.
He was furious. Now, part of that was the fact that I joined the union and that was kind of a whole thing.
How much experience had you had before then?
So I'd been interning from 95 to 97 and I just I'd been practicing like in my closet at home.
Okay.
I hadn't done anything actually on air.
Yeah.
I think, you know what? I think they did let me read a couple of PSAs, the public service announcements that run at night between like 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.
Right.
It was like, make sure to get your breast exam, like whatever, like those public service announcements.
Yeah.
I'd literally done a couple, but to me, I just remember my thought process as a 20-year-old. I'm like, this is going to be my big break. I'm going to be on one of the top news stations in a major market, breaking the news, and someone's going to hear my voice, and I'm going to get signed to an agency. Like, I literally thought, this is it. And then I got mildly reamed out by the PD, by the
Sounds
APD.
like more than mildly.
Well, I thought the APD, it seemed bad until the PD came in and told me all the reasons that I would never be on air. Never be on air.
But they didn't fire you.
I was an intern. I was working for free.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So they told me to go in there and start, back then commercials used to get sent to you on a reel tape and then you had to load them up into another system. So my job, they called it the dub monkey. So I was basically they're like, go do the dubbing and like never touch a microphone ever again.
Wow.
So 2 years later, it happens again in such a horrible fashion that it set me back for a number of years. I had been working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the 3 setbacks, and I'll tell you how I dealt with them in the immediate aftermath. But I want to jump to the second setback.
Okay.
It's 1999. I had decided that I wanted to get through Boston University as fast as I could, so I graduated in 3.5 years because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into radio. I wanted to be a voice actor. And I had become friends with a really talented production director, guy that made stuff for a radio station in Boston by the name of Willie B. And Willie was nice enough to set me up with a meeting in New York with the biggest agency, the biggest voiceover agency in the planet. And he got me a meeting with the biggest voiceover agent, at least when it came to radio. Huge agency, big agent. This guy could like make my career like that. And so I graduate early. I go down. It's the summer of 1999. And, I'd been working on it. So I had a tape. I had a demo tape. And I go to the guy's office and I play him the tape. And he's like, not bad, like pretty good. And he says, so about your eyesight. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about my eyesight. And he's like, how do you read copy? And I tell him, I got to get it a little ahead of time. This is back then I had some vision. And what I used to do is I'd either use a magnifying glass or get it printed out really big. And I'd I couldn't read at the speed you had to talk. So I'd read it real slowly and take a few minutes and then I'd memorize it and take me a little time. Mm-hmm. But I could do it, good enough to get some work done. I've been getting some work at that point. And he just goes, no one's going to want to work with you. Like he heard my explanation as to how I did it. And he said, no one will work with you. And I'm like, so what do I do? And he's like, that's not my problem. No one's going to want to work with a blind voice actor, legally blind voice actor. And he just kind of stands up and he hits eject. Like back then it was a cassette tape. I played him a tape, gives me a tape. And he's like, hope you have other plans.
Wow.
Now this was my plan. So I graduated college. I left early because I thought I was going to be a voiceover actor. And so I go to the biggest agency and the biggest agent and I play him my best tape and he tells me I need other plans.
Oh my gosh.
I was beyond devastated. I'm like, this is what my plan. Like,
It
this
was
is,
such a big opportunity.
yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
I figured, I already I wasn't working my way up the ladder, like, because of the connections I had, and I had a pretty good tape back then, a pretty good bass voice at least. And that guy told me no, and I'm like, well, then what's the point? Like, what do I do now? That one derailed me, and I will tell you, I got on the street. I made it out of that agency. I forget what floor it was on. I made it out of the agency. I made it down to the first floor, and I was 1999. I was 22 years old, I think, probably just turned 22. And I kind of got one of those,
Yeah.
like starting to well up, and then it just, like, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I thought my whole path was gonna be being a voice actor,
Right.
and so I went down to New York with this, like, here I come. Like, I'm starting my career.
Yeah.
I'm starting at the top. I'm in New York, and so to walk in with that and to walk out with, go find another job. Go find another career path, because no one's going to want to work. Basically, he said no one's going to work with a disabled voice actor.
Right.
And so that one screwed me up. That one, I was bawling on the streets of New York City. Unfortunately, it was New York, so nobody cares. They're like,
Right.
just some crying dude.
Yeah.
Probably didn't get enough heroin last night or something. So nobody cared. People like walking around me. And I had spent on a hotel. I was in New York for like 2 more days, because I've been planning on, like, visiting some other, like, I was going to go to CBS. I was like going to visit all the places that I was going to, like, try and get work at. But instead I just sat there and kind of was just in shock for 2 days.
Understandably. Yeah.
Now let me fast forward again to 2013. So 14 years after that.
Okay.
I'd been building my career, and I'd found a place for myself in voice acting using the big voice. I could do rock radio, I could do sports radio, I could do some news talk, mostly radio stuff. And I'd gotten a couple television campaigns where they were looking for, like, a radio announcer. I remember I actually did a PlayStation video game.
Nice.
But it was like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. It was like something like that.
Yeah.
And so 2013, I decide I'm going to leave the radio station that I got in a job at, and I'm going to go full-time voice acting. Full-time. So I quit the job at the radio station. I got my whole home studio set up, and I start auditioning everywhere. Now, up until 2013, I'd come up in radio. I knew radio, and I thought that voiceovers was basically just radio. I don't know, that's where my mind was.
Yeah.
And I realized there's a lot more to it. There's television, there's movie trailers, there's commercials. Oh my God, there's this whole wide world of commercials out there. And so I sign up through a pay-for-play casting agency called voice123.com. And because it's my full-time job, I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm making custom demos, and I'm sending these things out, and I'm auditioning to everything on voice123.com. Now,
Was that the beginning days of that?
I think so. I think it was pretty early. And this is, most people that are on that kind of a website, they're like, I'm going to try voice acting. So, they might work their 9 to 5, and they'll submit at night, maybe get something in. But I was there all day. An audition came up, boom, I bang it out. And I was auditioning like 10, 12 times a day on that website.
Wow.
I got one job on a hunting show, because my voice kind of worked for a hunting show. It's like, we're tracking big buck deer out in the wild, like something like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, and it's like a TV show too. It was like on some network no one had ever heard of. But I've got my stable of radio stations. I got one TV thing, and I'm submitting, and I get an email. I'm at the gym. I remember I was having a particularly awesome day. I'd just gone on my first date with Banana, and I get an email from, I forget his name, but it was like and it was like the biggest commercial casting agency.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, he's contacting me directly. Guy gives me a 6-paragraph email about how horrible I was. And he said, he's like, we keep getting your submissions day after day, submission after submission. You clearly have no talent. You don't know what you're doing. Your reads are all off. They're really pushed. They're really forced. They're bad. They're pathetic. And we're sick and tired of listening to you. You can either stop sending or keep sending, knowing that we're never going to listen.
Wow.
Guy was obviously having a day, first of all.
Yeah, he was in a bad mood.
But, because maybe I just kept showing up. And because I was full-time going at it, like maybe I was the first one in every time.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're horrible at what you do. Now, I didn't quite have enough to, like, I still needed to start building the career to survive. This is me on like I'm paddling into the wave of my voiceover career,
Yeah.
and I'm looking back and I'm like, all right, things are going good, and literally the thing just crashed on my head because the guy tells me, this is the casting director at the biggest casting agency. Again, I'm having the people at the top of the industry tell me how effing horrible I am at my job.
Jeez.
And he's like, you need to stop submitting immediately. So let's bounce back and tell you what I did after each one of these.
Okay.
In 1997, after Princess Di passed away, and my program director told me that I was nasal, I spoke too fast, I had a bad accent, and no one could understand me. What I did is I bought a series of cassettes from a professor at Emerson University called Voice and Articulation. His name was Ken Cornell. And I started teaching myself how to not have a Boston accent because I didn't realize, I didn't even know I had a Boston accent.
Does anyone know they have an accent?
I know.
They have one.
Yeah. So, my name was Peter. I didn't have any brothers or sisters. I grew up in Winchester, and I swore all the time because that's what everybody does out there.
Right.
And I started working, instead of giving up, the guy telling me, here's what happened. The guy told me all the reasons I was never going to be a voice actor. And so instead of saying, crap, I'm never going to be a voice actor, which I think is what happens to a lot of people. A lot of people get that feedback, something that you want to do, and they tell you why you're bad at it and why you can't do it. And then a lot of people take that knocking down and they don't get back up. What I did is I started addressing all of those things.
You took it as criticism.
Right.
Yeah.
After
constructive criticism.
After I may have cried a little bit that day too. I mean, getting a big, serious man in your face and telling you why you're so horrible is kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started listening to those tapes, and then eventually I'd saved up and started taking voice and articulations from the actual professor at Emerson College, and he started me from the letter A. He's like, you do have a big nose, and you are nasal. I was like, thanks. Like it was very, I talked up here a lot. My name is Peter, and it's just very easy for things to come out my nose. And I talked really fast, and I'm from the Boston area, and I just didn't have a really good way of talking at all.
Like another famous Peter that everyone knows.
Yeah, Lois.
Yeah.
So it was, and I didn't realize it. And so what I figured out at that point, I didn't know how I sounded. I realized that I needed to start listening back to myself. So what I did is I took a job as a telemarketer, and this did two things for me. Well, three things. Paid minimum wage,
Yeah.
which was pretty horrible at the time. It was like
sure.
$5.25 an hour or something like that. But it allowed me to work with my voice. Now, people like getting into voice acting now. I get the emails like, how do I land commercials? How do I get on TV shows? I'm like, I was happy to just be talking to people that answered their phone at 7:00 at night in the Boston area. But to me, I was working with a script. I had to deliver the script, and I had to engage people. And so for me, that was a form of voice acting. But it also allowed me to, the telemarketing company was in the same building as the radio station. So I would do the telemarketing from 6 to 9 p.m. And then 9 p.m., I would walk out the back door, come around another back door, and it let me into the radio station. And from maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning every night, I would read copy into a computer and then listen back to it.
Wow.
And I would do that every night.
They let you do that.
They didn't know because it was in the middle of the night.
Oh.
I kind of snuck my way in there. I went from one part of the building where I had a key. I got the key to get in there to do my telemarketing. And then I went in the back way and I did my voice acting practice all night. And then I left. And I skateboarded all the way home through Boston.
Wow.
Did my homework from 2 to 3 or whatever, and then started class the next morning at 8 a.m. But he told me and I just him getting in my face when I sat down and thought about it. I was like, oh, he's right. I don't know what I sound like, and I apparently sound horrible. So I spent a long time kind of working on that and trying to figure out how can I make myself sound better. Now,
based on what he said.
Very much. Again, I think he wasn't giving me a pep talk. He wasn't like, hey, Pete, you need to step it up a little bit. He was like, get the F off of the microphone. He was
trying to shoot you down permanently.
Which, again, could have easily happened. Could have sent me in a very different career path. So 1999, I'd been taking those voice and articulation classes. I've been working with some voice acting coaches. I had the demo together, and I was sounding pretty good. At that time, I think even Willie B., the guy that referred me, knew I wasn't there, but he knew I had potential. So when the guy in New York at the biggest agency that was out there at the time told me that no one was going to work with me, I realized in retrospect, as much as I thought he was an a-hole at the time, I was like, how dare he tell someone no one's going to want to work with a disabled actor? What he was saying in his New York way was that no one's going to work with a disabled voice actor. And remember, when did he tell me that? He told me that after I explained my process. And my process was how it takes me some time to read each line and put it into my head.
You're memorizing at the time.
So start to finish, because text-to-speech, text-to-speech did not exist. So, you know, at that time, it was taking me 20 to 30 minutes just to get the piece of copy in my head. And, you know, I think a lot of people think, if you saw the movie In a World, you think every voiceover job pays thousands and thousands of dollars. It doesn't. You have to do a lot of reading all day, and you build up a base of smaller clients, and you just have to be efficient. You have to get through a lot of copy. And what he was saying to me, without actually taking the time to explain it, because it was a New York agent, was that no one's going to work with me because I didn't have the capability to read enough copy to make it worth someone's time to start putting me out there. Because he's thinking, if it takes me a half hour to memorize copy, you know, how many pieces of copy can I read a day? Like, maybe I can get 10 if I'm solidly booked. And it wasn't enough. And that's why, and I didn't get that at the time either. I was so focused on, he didn't like me because I'm disabled. I was kind of in that mindset, I guess.
Yeah, that's tough.
I didn't hear what he was saying. Or maybe he really was saying, no one's going to work with me because I'm disabled, and I took it differently. I chose to take it differently.
Yeah.
But I did. So that's why I started. At first I started working on memory puzzles and memory games, and I was trying to learn to memorize things after I read it once through. I spent about 2 years doing that.
Wow.
And my memory was getting pretty spectacular, but still I couldn't read a 60-second piece of copy and get it in my head. It was still taking a little bit of time. Mm-hmm. But that's when I was working on that, is when text-to-speech started to become popular on phones. And I started realizing that, you know, I remember getting a text and then listening to it and telling someone what the text said. And it seems like such a simple thing. But I realized, I'm like, wait, me listening to that text, someone wrote that, they put it into a computer, and I listened to it, and I said it back. I'm like, oh, it was like a light bulb. I'm like, wait, that's like a way I can deliver copy. And so I got some text-to-speech, like early text-to-speech software for my computer, and I got an ear. Well, originally I was doing it through headphones, and the headphones, you could hear the text-to-speach through the regular headphones. So like I'm talking and you're hearing in the background, like, tonight on the WB network. So I realized I had to shove something in my head, like an earbud. And then I realized, I'm like, this is the way I'll be able to deliver copy. And immediately, like I tried it immediately, and when you're listening to a robot and trying to talk, it's like mind-numbing. Like literally, like, your brain is like, what is happening? It's like someone scrubbing your head with a sponge. It was like too much input, but I saw the path to how that would work. Mm-hmm. You know, and after a year of doing that, like a solid year, like this was me working like hours on end, listening to that and trying to repeat it back and constantly trying to get fresh new copy, because I realized if I was just reciting the old copy, it was my super memory that was kicking in. So I was working really hard to find new copy and listen to it and repeat it back. And then maybe by the end of 2 years, I was able to start listening to any piece of copy, let it get about 8 seconds ahead of me, and I could read it first time through. 2 years solid work.
Wow.
And that's when I started picking up, you know, I started working for a lot of little radio stations. The first one I ever got was WHMH Rockin' 101 in St. Cloud, Minnesota. And, you know, you sign on to these stations and they pay you $200 a month, which is not paying my mortgage, right?
Right.
And they send you just endless amounts of copy. You know, I agree. I'm like, send me however much you want, put me on retainer. And so, you know, I had tons of these little radio stations. This is how I was starting to make my career. And I was able to just bang through tons and tons of copy. Now, what I've been doing in that period, say, call it like 2001 to 2013, was just focusing on this rock radio delivery, news talk radio delivery. It's just what was the problem when I got to 2013. I was having trouble like really supporting myself on all these small radio stations doing this niche kind of voice acting. And that's when I realized, you know, I'm going to go full time. I need to expand. I need to do television. I need to do other, you know, narration. I need to really open myself up. And when the guy wrote me that nasty letter that, you know, my delivery was terrible, no one's going to want to listen to me. Again, it was a crushing moment, because I'm thinking at that point, I'm successful. Like I'm booking jobs. But this big guy at a big agency, again, I was trying to take that next step. Like I wanted to work with commercial agents and get like work.
You had already defined so many, you know, expectations of you at that point to receive that at that point was probably just like, but I already did all this.
Yeah.
Can't you see that I can overcome anything?
Yeah. But it was, so, but his credits and who he was made it that I had to listen. He told me I was terrible. And so I started working with a voice coach in early 2013, right after this happened. Her name was Maurice Tobias. And she was very much into the emotion of voice acting, which I didn't get.
The acting side. Right?
Yeah, and I didn't understand it because I was, again, so from the time I was 13, I was told I had a big voice.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought voice acting was, using your big voice. And I remember she was talking like to me about my relationship with my parents and like my relationship with my friends and like how I felt about my vision loss. I'm like, what's going on? And then, while we're talking, she'd give me copy to read. She'd email it to me. I'd put it in the ear prompter and I'd read it. And she told me, she's like, you are spectacular when you're pissed off.
Nice.
She told me, she's like, you're really good when you're pissed off. So my very first demo that I worked on after her, it was not W, it was SmackDown, some SmackDown thing.
WWE.
What was the other one? This MMA.
Oh,
it was
nice.
MMA Raw. That's what it was. MMA Raw. And so my demo was all these like big, hard hitting energy things. And then I think I did like a Fox animation domination. This is all for demo. So like that was like using your voice and being big. But what I hadn't, because I didn't get it at the time, I didn't get what she was saying, like draw on your well of emotion. I was so focused on how do I sound? How am I massaging this microphone? How much more smooth is my voice than everyone else's? So this commercial agent who I was submitting to 10 times a day was getting like, serious commercials like where they needed an actor being like, the workforce is really hard to get into these days, and I don't know where to turn. Then I found Indeed. Like you're supposed to talk the damn thing, and I'm reading the commercials like, the workforce is hard to get into until I found Indeed. Like, because that's all I knew to do. And so, after months and months and years of working with Maurice and, actually learning how to act, this is what I tell people all the time, voice acting. There's literally voice and acting in the job title.
Right.
It was after a short period of time after that, I started to actually book some commercials, and then I got into the trailer world, and it all snapped together. But, and those are three of the major ones. I still remember, when I was bad, I didn't stop putting myself out there. I kept sending out demos, and people are mean. Like people are just mean in the industry. I ran across some encouraging people. I told the story of Don LaFontaine, the main movie trailer guy who was encouraging and gave me lessons. But people were not shy about telling me how much I sucked for a long time. And then, that period between 1999 and maybe the 5 or 6 years after that, before I was really efficient and proficient at using the text-to-speech, there's a lot of people being like, no, we're not going to work with you. Like, because I'd say like, can I get the copy ahead of time? They're like, no, we don't release the copy. We're just not going to work with you. And so
just because they knew you were blind.
Because they knew I was blind, and because I couldn't read the copy like everybody else. I would do, there was a Boston casting company, and they would only give you the copy. It's like it was nuclear secrets or something. They didn't want you to leave the building with it. They gave me the copy, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take this in the waiting room. They're like, no, you can't. I'm like, okay. Like I'd sit like in the like an ante room right before, and I literally faked diarrhea. And I'm like, I got to go to the bathroom really, and I ran out of the room with the copy. Right. Wow. So it was the only way I could get, and I had a magnifying glass in my pocket. And this is at the time, my memory was pretty spectacular at the time. And so I ran into the bathroom, I sat on the toilet, I took out the magnifying glass, and I'm reading the copy. It was for a restaurant chain in Boston. And, the woman, she's like, hey, you weren't supposed to take that. I'm like, I know, I'll be right out. And I'm like, I think I might've made like a couple like noises. Like, I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to that. And so I
do it in your voiceover voice.
Totally. And I got the thing memorized, and I just splashed some water in my face to make it look like I went through like an ordeal in there. Yeah. And I go in, I'm like, all right, I'm all set. And they're like, yeah, you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And then I held up the piece of paper in front of me, pretending as if I was reading it. And for all I know, it was upside down. I don't even know. I don't even know if it was facing the right way. But I did the audition. Let's read it this way. Let's read it that way. One more time. Okay, thank you for the audition. But that's the things I was having to go through, because it wasn't, it's the entertainment business. It was a different time, a different world. And I think entertainment is always pretty damn cutthroat. I can't walk in there and be like, hey, I need some accommodations. Like, can you guys set this up for me?
Well, definitely not back then. They probably
No.
didn't care at all.
No.
Yeah.
And it was, when I did get signed by my first agent, he's like, do not tell anyone that you are blind or legally blind.
So brutal.
Yeah, he's like, do not put that out there because, they're gonna think, the casting directors and the editors and buyers are all gonna think like, all right, we got 50 submissions on this. That guy's blind. He's probably gonna be a pain in the ass to work with. He's like, do not let anybody know. And so I really, in my hometown, I'd done a couple of stories. I'd done a couple of things in Boston, where I talked about it because I was in the media. I was a bit of a personality at that time. But in the voiceover business, it was like, shh, don't tell anybody he's blind. He works differently than everybody else. And that wasn't until probably right as I moved out here in 2016, 2017, when I was, booking movie trailers, the voice of some TV networks, a really solid career. And the times had changed. Instead of people being like, that seems difficult, we don't want to work with a disabled guy, it kind of started changing towards like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Well, that's what my question is like, were people not impressed that you were even able to do it back then?
So if I told them after the fact, there were a couple like I remember I was working with a trailer house that was doing Monday Night Countdown football. And so each Monday night during the football season, there was a movie trailer that would play, Monday Night Countdown brought to you by, and it was, whatever, Bridge of Spies, like whatever movie was hot and that wanted to be promoted. And one time I accidentally left the speaker on. And so it was like Monday Night Football brought to you by, or Monday Night Countdown brought to you by. And some guy's like, what was that? Like, why is a robot reading the script? And I explained the whole thing to him. He's like, holy crap, man. But I've been working with him for 2 football seasons already.
He had no idea.
But then when I told him, he's like, wait, so I send you the script and you're like listening to it? And I'm like, yeah. And he thought it was pretty cool. But that's because I had a 2-year repertoire with the guy. And
he already knew how good you were.
Right,
yeah.
He knew I wasn't going to screw up. That's why by the time I started really telling the story, again, the times changed, but also most of the people in the industry knew what was up with me. And they also knew that I had a really good track record. Like, I don't mess up. I don't cause problems for people. I don't slow the process down. But it took a long time of like hiding it. And, that one thing I tell you about in Boston, that wasn't the only time I faked holding a piece of paper up in front of me because people wanted to see the actor holding the script and like being in the office and being in the studio. There's a lot of technology changes that really helped me out. The fact that you can do it from home now. And, you read it in your home office and then you send it in. But doing stuff in person in the late 90s, early 2000s was just beyond stressful. And, you talk about the agent who said no one was going to work with me. Like, I also didn't drive. Like, I couldn't get from place to place very quickly. And, they needed you to like bounce from studio to studio to studio and, just get the copy, bang it out, read it, go to the next one. And, when he said no one's going to work with me, like, I got it in retrospect. I mean, the guy was also a bit of an a-hole, but I got what he was saying. So, the 3 biggest a-holes, the PD of the radio station, that big agent, and the big agent in New York, and the head of the commercial agency, these are 3 influential people in my business that all told me how I was horrible, but more importantly, they told me, why I was so bad at what I was doing. And so I was able to take all that advice and kind of put it into action. Now, it took years, like years and years and years and years. And I was able to keep working on my voiceover career because I'd got a tangentially similar job. I started working at a radio station. I put myself in front of a microphone. Now, I wasn't the voice of the radio station that I was working at, but I was able to do some voice work here and there. And I was always multitasking. While I was doing one job, I was working on something else. During this time, because so many people had told me I wasn't going to be a voice actor. You've seen like my long list of lives that I've lived throughout my life.
Yeah.
I thought because so many people had told me I wasn't going to be a voice actor and text-to-speech wasn't out there and I hadn't gotten the coaching and I started to believe I'm not going to be a voice actor. I started a band. I started a band called Penthouse J and I started like performing with them thinking, all right, maybe I'll make my money this way.
Then, well, you're still doing it, right? With not Penthouse J, but you're still doing other things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm still always just throwing things at the wall because you got people telling you no. You're like, well, where's the yes going to be? So I was in the band. Then I started doing stand-up comedy for a while. I started traveling around New England and doing some stand-up comedy. I wrote my first novel back in 2004, then took a break from that for a long time. Wrote 3 more novels starting in 16, I guess. And the first one I wrote went #1 on Amazon. Second one went #5. And the third one was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. I did male modeling for a while.
Nice.
When I was in New York and in Boston. Can I tell a random story?
Yeah.
I forget. So I was like 27 and still like maybe 26. I was 26, and I've been doing some runway stuff. Not a lot of print. I wasn't getting a lot of print work, but I got called into the modeling agency in Boston, and it was like
How did you like initially start that?
I did. I always started the things with like the pay to play. I was like, I'll put a couple bucks into this job to see.
Yeah.
So I went to the John Robert Powers School of Modeling, and I learned how to walk runway. And I got one of the female coaches there, and she worked with me on faking my eye contact. Spent a lot of time with me on. People always like, how does it look like you're looking at the camera? I'm like, oh, there's a girl that worked with me for months on end on that, and how to walk the catwalk and how to, give the right attitude and stuff. But 26 years old, I wasn't having like a big successful career. It was a few bucks here and there. So, I was in the band, I was doing the male modeling, I was writing some novels, I was working at the radio station, I was writing some cartoons at the time. I was just trying to figure out how the heck I was going to make a living as a disabled guy who kept getting told every time I brought it up to someone, oh, no one's going to want to work with you. I kept trying to find ways to work. So 26, I walk in and it's like we're putting you out to pasture. You're too old. Like it was.
Oh, modeling agency?
Yeah, at the modeling agency.
Yeah.
I was like, I was a 26-year-old guy, and they're basically like, you need to retire. You're too old for this. And I was like, what? And they made me feel really old at 26. But one of the last jobs they offered me, tell me if you even know this exists. They told me that I could be hired out by cruise lines and resorts to be a party starter. And so what you did is the cruise line, call it, Carnival Cruise Lines, they'd hire 2 or 4 different people from modeling agencies, 2 attractive men, 2 attractive women, and you went on the cruise and pretended to be a guest. You didn't tell them that it was a job. You were just there. And so when, the what was it called? Like the activities organizer was like, hey, let's play shuffleboard. Then you and the girl are like if other people don't volunteer, or if it's like a pool event or something, you're supposed to be the first volunteer every time. And then same thing at like when there's like when the clubs or something, you're supposed to be the first one out on the dance floor. And you basically, when people see like, hey, those 2 young attractive people are doing it, we'll go out there too. And if people didn't follow you, it was your job to basically male gigolo it. Like you were supposed to go out into the crowd and find women that didn't look like they were, interested in coming out. You're like, hey, come on out and dance with me. You're like trying to get the whole thing started, basically.
That's funny.
And, one, I was going to be terrible at it because my vision.
You couldn't see them.
Right. I couldn't see who was having a bad time. But 2, I was like, that just sounds creepy. I'd like talk about like Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo. I was like,
that's bordering on that.
A little
about
bit.
As close as you can get without doing it.
But apparently that's a thing. It was started by Club Med. If you ever heard of that, Club Med used to stock their resorts with paid people to make it seem like, look at us, we're having like a great time.
I totally believe that.
And it's a thing that goes on to this day, which makes me like super interested to know, like if you've ever been on a cruise, if you've ever been to like a secrets resort or a sandals resort or something.
I've never been on a cruise.
But if anybody that has, and they're like, yeah, this girl came up and danced with me a couple times, like, yeah, that was pretty fun. Like, yeah, I should ask for a number. Like, oh man, that was her job. You didn't know it, but that was her job.
Yep. She's not interested. She's paid.
And then I listened to one of the girls that did it for a living. I was trying to consider it for half a second before I realized it was too hard. But she told me that part of her job was to like look at couples that looked like they were fighting or looked like they weren't having a good time. And she was like supposed to go out there and like convince the guy to dance with her. Because she said 9 times out of 10, if you start dancing with a guy, the girl will come out, and then you've got 2. Now you got 2 instead of if you go for a single guy and he starts dancing, he might leave that person might leave the dance floor after the party starter leaves. But if you get the guy out and his girlfriend follows or wife follows, then you got those 2 and they're probably going to stay. It was all like the psychological warfare to like make people party and want to have fun.
Makes me question everything.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what's real and what's not.
Yeah. Are you even my friend, Pete, or are you paid?
Well, a little of both.
Can I ask you some questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, so I think just like in general, something that I have always been impressed by with you is that you do not let rejection get in your way. You don't let it set you back. You just keep going, which I think is really difficult for a lot of people. Like as you're saying, with all these stories, like you got set back, especially by that second one. It sounded like, but you used that as an opportunity to get better, and you took that criticism and you just said, all right, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna apply it to myself and I'm gonna get what I want. And I see you do that with YouTube. I've watched your YouTube career go up and down. You've had really good times, you've had bad times, and you've talked to me about it when it's not good. Sometimes it bothers you or whatever. I think it's just really interesting to see how you just have this like unrelenting forward motion, and I'm wondering if you think that you were kind of just born with that, or is that something you've had to develop over your life, and kind of where do you think that comes from? Because I don't think everyone has that.
Yeah, it's funny when people ask me, I was like, what do you mean? Like, why don't you have that? It took me a long time to realize that everybody's kind of different. Like, for a long time, when I had a goal, there's three keys to achieving your goal. It's desire, ability, and time. So, when I wanted to be a voice actor, did I have the desire? Yes. Did I have the ability? No, but I felt like it was within my skill set. People told me I had the good voice. And time, was I willing to put in the time? A lot of people dead end at any of those points, but time is a big one. I always, as we just discussed, had 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 4 jobs at a time. I was working, I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and start doing something and wouldn't finish until 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night because I was working so many different jobs at a time. I think a lot of people are like, well, my day job is, being whatever they do, a database administrator. I don't have time to get into voice acting. I'm like, well, you need to make time. You need to make time in the evening. There are sacrifices involved with that. There's a lot of reasons why people don't follow through with this. I would say all the girlfriends that I had in the time when I was building my career, like, I'm sorry. Like, I did not give them enough time. I tried my best, but I was super duper focused on my career and trying to make sure, because don't forget, I was told at the age of 8, I just put this video out the other day, I was told by a state worker that I would never be able to hold down a job that would allow me to support myself. And furthermore, I was told that I'd never be able to be independent because I'd always need someone's help. This is something that I was told when I was 8 years old.
Right.
And back then, again, people are like, wow, why do you run into so many a-holes? It's because they were speaking their truth at that point in time. I'm telling these stories in 2025, but in 1985, when a social worker found out that this little kid was going to go blind, like, there weren't computers. Like, no one had a home computer.
Right.
So forget text to speech. Forget, AI software that can read stuff to you. She's just like, this kid's going to be blind. Like, what's he going to do?
Right.
And it was a valid question. So at the time, it was very valid. So they were trying to put me on the path to sign me up for state aid, send me to a school for the blind, probably get some state aid, maybe live at home with my parents. Like, this was a brief conversation that my parents and I had with the state worker. Like, these are the realities of having a blind son that you're going to have to deal with. So back to your question, I didn't like that path. I didn't like being told, especially because my eyesight wasn't that bad at the time. I couldn't imagine it. I didn't understand. If you'd given me these eyes in 1985, I'd have been like, holy crap, you were right. It went away. Like, I didn't understand the concept
How
of
bad it
losing
was
my
going to
eyesight.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. So back then I was like, yeah, these people tell me I'm never going to get a job. I'm going to get a job.
So you think it was a bit of just kind of a defiant spirit that was like born out of, you were told that you weren't going to be able to do a lot of things from an early age, and you were defiant of that and proved them wrong, and you think that kind of just carried on into your professional life?
I do.
That defiance.
Yeah, I mean, just being told such a big thing. Like at age 8, kids are told like they can't stay out past dark, or like they can't have chocolate for breakfast, and I'm told I can't get a job and be independent. Like, whoa, like that's a big no. Like the kids get different no you can't do. I got a big no. So that was an early one to suffer, and so I guess it did. And I said no back. I'm like, no, you're wrong. That's not what's going to happen. And that's why, I watch people now or listen to people now. I get emails a lot. A lot of people want to figure out how to get into voice acting. They're like, I've been, 25 years. I've been, working at the whatever store they work at, and they want to get into it. And I give them the path. I eventually put it into voiceuniversity.com because there's so much information.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just like, well, it's a lot of work. I'm like, yeah, but I've never shied away from the work.
Right. Yeah. You've leaned into it, which has made you who you are. I mean, the only reason you are where you are is because you were just unrelenting with your work and your work ethic.
Rarely do you see a very successful, sometimes you hear stories of this guy had this revolution, he was sitting on the toilet and then he came up with this invention, or
Right.
this person, right place, right time, or an actor who just so happened to get the right role. But, 99.9% of the time, the formula for success is super easy. It's just work.
A lot of work. And a lot of people probably think with you maybe, oh, he just has a great voice, and that's why he's a great voice actor. It's the opposite.
It was it was bad.
Yeah.
It was a bad voice. It was a nasal voice. I had this, like I had that range. But
Yeah.
then what I tell people right now, and not just 2025, but I'm talking like the last 15 years, if you watch TV, which, I don't know if a lot of people sit through commercials these days, you watch TV for 30 minutes, how many voices like mine do you hear? Like one, maybe two.
Yeah.
Most of the commercials these days are the new Honda Pilot. Everybody's going to get out there. The family's going to have a great time. Just like a regular guy with a regular voice, just a regular actor. And that's why I had to reinvent myself again. That's why, when that commercial guy told me why I was so bad, I had to learn how to act. And, people with regular voice, I get casting, I'm on a casting list, and I see all the time a neutral voice, regular guy. Like, so the work that I'm competing for is like top tier, like there's a few guys with this voice, and we're all competing for the next trailer, the next big promo.
Everyone I know, when I show them your videos, is like, oh, I know that guy.
Yeah.
Everyone knows your voice.
Yeah.
I have another question. So, like, I think a big part of rejection that is hard for people is that it kind of makes you question who you are and, what you bring to the table in such kind of a deep way and cutting way, especially in situations where it's like getting fired from a job or getting broken up with or something like that. And it kind of makes people just, to their core question if they're on the right path, if they're a good person, if they're valuable. What advice would you give to someone who's dealing with that kind of deep rejection that makes them question everything about themselves?
That's a brilliant question. It was something I was thinking about today, and I didn't work it in. So thank you so much for reading my mind and asking that one.
Yeah.
This is, and I can give you an example. When I was getting rejected a lot in 2013 from the jobs that I was trying to, the commercial jobs I was trying to expand to, and I wasn't getting them, and then I had this guy tell me I was bad. I heard, I'm bad. I'm Pete bad. Like,
Right.
and then, I'd go to bed every night like, ooh, I suck. Like, I suck. I personally am bad at what I do. And it was giving me like hard time with like self-esteem and the way I felt about myself. And it was something, Maurice Tobias, the voice coach I was working with, she's like, she's like, you're not right for this job. You're not right for that job. When you fit for a job. And I started to realize it because at first I was saying that my voice is me. Like I'm putting me out there.
Right.
And when I wasn't right, I felt it as a personal rejection of me. And I was actually kind of a miserable person at that
I
point.
think that's how a lot of people feel when they're rejected from a job or
right.
a relationship.
And you have to understand that it's not you, the person hiring or the person casting in my case is, and you like, once I got to the other side of it, I had the opportunity to do some casting and to you hear one voice and you put it in the mix and you're like, no, it doesn't quite sit right. Because there's already music, there's already a tone. Like the voice is the last thing they drop in. And then I really started realizing, I was like, oh, the voice just isn't right. Like it just doesn't work and it's not personal. And maybe your read was bad, but whatever. It just that one didn't fit at that point.
Right.
And that's why I feel like when people get rejected and they take it so personally, because it's hard not to. Like you go for a sales job and you got rejected and they didn't think you were going to be a good salesperson. And you know what? Maybe you at that moment in time with your skill level and your charm and your experience, maybe you weren't going to be a good salesperson. People that hire do make mistakes. But when I heard time and time and time again about how bad my reads were, I was like, they're right. Like my reads are wrong.
Yeah.
So every time I got rejected, it wasn't they were rejecting me as a human. They were rejecting my skill set, which I needed to improve.
Right.
And that's how
At the time, they were rejecting you at the time,
right.
but they didn't know what you were going to be.
Yeah. So anytime anybody's going for a job and they get rejected, like, yeah, your competition may have been better, but you have the opportunity to be better next time. When you
Yeah,
get rejected, you're only getting rejected in that moment in
in
time.
that moment, and it's it might just not be a good fit, right? I know like a lot of employers say that as kind of a write off, but like in relationships, right? Like I've dated some people that I thought were really really great people. It just literally wasn't a good fit, right? You're
Yeah.
just not compatible. And same with me. Like I've been broken up with to where it makes me question, am I lovable?
Yeah.
Do I have a problem? And it just makes you question everything about yourself. But as you're saying, it's like it might just not be a good fit at that time, or it might just not be a good fit in with that relationship, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's hard to maintain your kind of solidarity and your belief in yourself in those times. And I think that's the hardest thing about rejection, for most people. And you hear about when people are unemployed, just the
Constant
yeah, the
rejection.
constant
Yeah.
rejection and
Yeah.
just how that works on you and makes you depressed. And so I think like finding value within yourself outside of those external validators is really important.
I
But
look at each day differently, though. I think when people, especially now, I think a lot of people, when they're in a cycle of rejection, they start getting in a really crappy mind space and they start, collapsing in on themselves.
yeah,
Especially, right after 2013, when I was like desperately trying to get voiceover work to support myself, I quit the job and it was basically like, they always say the salesman who needs to make the sale will make the sale more than someone who doesn't. So to me, I was
yeah,
like, I need to book these jobs. And
right,
that's why I was finding all those like little radio jobs here and there and here. So I would, but I was, to this day, there's still a lot of auditioning. I'm not so big and popular in the voiceover world that jobs just get handed to me. Like that's not really how it goes in the voiceover business. You're
right,
still doing a lot of auditioning. And for every 100 auditions I get rejected from 98 of them. Now, I've got a huge base of work that I already do, and I have a bunch of big jobs that obviously sustain me quite well. But new work, it's like, I wasn't quite right, and I'm okay with that.
yeah,
But when you're in the cycle of rejection, I wake up every day with what opportunity, and I still do this. Like every morning I wake up, I'm like, what opportunity is going to come my way? And am I ready to seize it? And this is, I could do a whole nother show on time management. Time management is how do you fit in all these things? How do I manage to do it? Like YouTube's kind of full time at this point, but
yeah,
also so is voice acting. And just so like, and even surfing, like I'm mildly neurotic. I don't know if I can like ask everybody to be as crazy as me to utilize their time as good as I can. But in the morning when I do my vocal warm ups, I have to stretch my vocal cords to get ready for the day. Uh, Maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, I started doing it, and there was no real reason to do this just for pure voiceovers. But I started trying to do it with I'd try and do as much as I could in one breath, and because that was helping with my breath control for surfing.
mm,
So while I'm doing voiceover warm ups, I'm preparing myself to go surfing in the weekend. And then even I sit in a really weird chair throughout the day.
yeah,
And I sit in a very bizarre, it's a kneeling chair, but I don't even use it right. While I'm sitting doing my working, I'm constantly doing leg stretches, like a butterfly stretch. I have one leg behind me because while I'm working, I'm making sure that I'm limber so that I don't get injured when I'm doing my surfing in the weekend. Um, Always trying to do, when I do my workout, I do a lot of my exercises on one leg, which is weird. It's not ideal but it helps me with my balance for surfing. And then, the voiceovers, I feel like um, I'm kind of constantly working on that as well. Like I'll go into rooms and start like, I'm in the bathroom and I have like a script on in my head and I'm like practicing that script. I mean, it's an all day, every day. I'm trying to at least do two things at once in
all the
order
time,
to better myself.
yeah,
Because like we're going back to, there's only so many opportunities and, you're not going to be right for a lot of them. But when they come, if you can be ready in that moment because you prepared yourself, then it's just going to work out much better.
yeah. We're at 5:53, so I kind of have one more question for you.
Sure.
And we kind of covered this, but I think there's kind of some nuance to it. Like, when you get a rejection that is, really something that's really important, or you feel like some kind of negativity from a rejection or maybe even like a negative comment on YouTube, how do you, at this point in your life, kind of let that roll off your back? Like, what goes on in your head?
I still need to be better with letting I am getting better after 5 years. I'm finally getting better with letting the YouTube
And
comments.
I guess that is a separate thing than a rejection, but
Oh my, the YouTube comment, that one's been, and most of the other people that I have dealt with, whether it was meeting Mr. Beast or Casey Neistat or Molly Burke, like they're like, "Oh, I don't read the comments. I don't read the comments." But like to me, reading the comments and being a part of my own community is big. Like
yeah, you're very
yeah,
active.
it's important
Hmm.
to me. I love my audience. I love the people that interact with me, and because of that, I end up in that comment section reading the negative things. It just takes, you really got to, if you're a person and you've been dealing with rejection and you have negative thoughts and stuff, fortunately for me, from a very early age, from the moment I told them, they're like, "You're not going to stay in regular school." I'm like, "Yes, I am." And then, I ended up being good at soccer until my eyesight crapped out and I couldn't play soccer anymore. And then I got good at swimming, became, I went to states for swimming. Like I always had things that I found, again, desirability time. Like I wasn't gonna be a champion tennis player. I couldn't see the
Yeah. Well,
ball.
even with surfing, I mean, the odds are stacked against you, right? And you've figured that out. So I guess you were saying like desire, it's like your desire to learn to surf was obviously extremely strong, and that's what led you through it. But that kind of desire you have is it's otherworldly, you know. It's not a lot of people have that, but I think you're right that it's kind of the core of, you know, don't let anything get in your way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. It's literally how I've functioned. I've always found a task. I mean, I've done so many things. Like, I was a champion sailor for a long time. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many things that I've done, and just I guess it's just how I'm wired. And people ask me, how do I get that way? It's really just sitting down. You got to figure out, is it really within your skill set, and do you really want it? Because I can't stand people that are like, I just really wish that I could be a stunt car driver, and I'm like, and what have you done
Right. Have you tried?
about that?
Have you crashed your car into a wall yet?
Right? Like there's driving classes up in LA, or there's paths to people's dreams, and you can sit there and say like, I really want to, but if you haven't taken the first step, you haven't really wanted to.
Right.
A lot of people are like, I'm going to write a novel, and like, I started saying that because I really loved writing, and then you know what I did? I wrote a novel, and then I wrote three more. Like,
That's crazy.
so I wish. It's funny when you're doing YouTube, they tell you to pick one person. They're like, do your show for this one person. Like,
Mhm.
is it a 27-year-old guy who's into beer and likes to play ultimate frisbee on the weekend? They tell you to like pick one person. And right now in my head, I'm trying to pick one person who's having trouble being motivated and achieving their goals, and I want to talk to that one person.
I feel like that's so many people though. That's the cool thing about your channel is it can apply to almost anyone in any situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall advice is just to, like, if you've decided that you have the ability, why would you give up? Like, why? If you decide that there's something that you want to do, that you want to change career, you want to get into a relationship, get out of a relationship, you want to buy a house, like if there's something that you want to do and you've decided you have the ability or you think you do, the only thing someone telling you you don't have the ability should do is make you work harder.
Right.
I think that's just to go full circle on this whole thing. Is just take rejection as a learning, something to learn from.
Like what you did, which was you took the criticism, you applied it, and then you got to where you wanted to go. I think that's such a good illustration of what you're saying is like that was a major rejection, but you just took it as a learning experience. I mean, it was basically advice he was giving you
Yeah,
in a
because
way, you
rarely
know?
are people wrong. Like if you go on a job interview 5 times and you get the impression that like you're just not vibing or something, like maybe you need to work on your personal skills or something. Or
Right.
if they tell you 5 times like your resume is not big enough, maybe you need to go build you. Like people aren't saying stuff to you just to be dicks.
Right.
Like they're generally, even if they're saying the
They're not
guy,
trying to hurt your feelings
yeah, I
most
mean,
of the time.
yeah, I mean the guy in '99 in New York like was a dick and gave me some dick things that he said, but it was also true.
Yeah.
So Yeah. If you can get that through your head and then wake up each day and say, I'm going to put a little extra time. I've seen people close to me very recently tell me about their goals and then just say, well, I've got my 9 to 5 and I've got my significant other. There's no time. And I'm like, apparently not.
Plenty of time.
Yeah.
You got like, 5 to 9, baby. You got 5 to 1 in the morning.
Yeah. But if that, if you're immediately going to tell me like, I've got someone in my life and I've got a job, like, then you need to get happy with what you've got going on right now. Because if you're not going to put in the time, like we said about 20 minutes ago, time and work are going to be the biggest determining factors on your success.
Yeah.
Put it in. Put the time in.
Put the time in, baby. Well, speaking of time.
1 hour in? I just talked for an hour?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
5:59.
All right, then.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to anybody who listened to me yammer for an hour. Just these are questions that they roll up on the channel quite a bit, surprisingly. And I'm a shorts guy. YouTube only sends out my shorts. I couldn't answer that in 60 seconds or less, or even 3 minutes or less. So I appreciate the platform to talk about that.
I think it's nice to provide the people with more of you, just more about you and your past and everything. Because, like you said, you don't really get much of it from shorts.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Brooks, for the really insightful questions, giving me the opportunity to do this. Thanks to everybody for listening. I think, Brooks, we got a big old box from Galactic Snacks of some fancy snacks that we can...
Next week
or the week after, we can start getting fat again.
Let's do it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.